Hey, welcome to another episode of David Michael Woods Unfiltered. Take a listen here as Bill Barr
Action.
endorses
I don't
Donald
think
J.
he would
Trump.
actually go and kill political rivals and things like that.
If the January 6th case, the election interference case, doesn't move forward before the election, is that a mistake in your view?
If it doesn't move forward? No, I mean, I've said earlier on, I would have liked to see that tried before the election, but I think it's gotten too late.
But you were talking about Jack Smith and what he charged. Is in some part that the responsibility of the Supreme Court, that they could have heard these arguments back in December, they chose not to. They could rule sooner. They may not rule until June. I mean, they have a role in this as well.
No, I think it was teed up for them, and they acted very quickly to actually take the case quickly. And I think it hasn't been well prepared. I think that the circuit court didn't do its job. It should have sent it back for a fuller record. And I think the Supreme Court is doing the best they can under these circumstances.
Last time you and I spoke, when we had you on the show, you told me that you would jump off the bridge when it came to it on who you were going to support in the 2024 election. It appears that you have jumped off that bridge because you said recently you were going to vote for the Republican ticket come November, which means you're going to vote for Donald Trump.
I said that's what I plan to do at this stage.
You're saying you could change your mind, maybe?
Well, I'm not going to vote for Biden, this is a wild time. Who knows what's going to happen in 7 months? But I expect, as between Trump and Biden, there's no question in my mind.
Oh, so you're kind of suggesting maybe Donald Trump may not be the Republican nominee?
Or Biden may not be their Democrat.
So you would vote for another Democrat if a different Democrat was on the ticket?
It's hard to imagine that this party, the Progressive Democratic Party, would nominate someone I would support.
Yeah, I know you disagree with him, but I have to ask you about something that Trump posted about you this week because he responded in response to you saying you'd vote for the Republican ticket. Wow, former AG Bill Barr, who let a lot of great people down by not investigating voter fraud in our country, has just endorsed me for president despite the fact that I called him weak, slow-moving, lethargic, gutless, and lazy. Based on the fact that I greatly appreciate his wholehearted endorsement, I am removing the word lethargic from my statement. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah. It's classic Trump. What's the question?
What's your response?
Well, I mean, obviously, what I said was that I'm very disappointed that this country is stuck with this choice between two people who I don't think either of them should be president of the United States. But given that binary choice, I feel I have to choose Trump.
But he's mocking you.
So it's not about me. I think that I've said this all along. If faced with a choice between two people, neither of which I think should be president, I feel it's my duty to pick the person who I think would do the least damage to the country. And I think Trump would do less damage than Biden. And I think all this stuff about a threat to democracy, I think the real threat to democracy is the progressive movement and the Biden administration.
The Biden administration or President Biden himself?
Biden's support for the progressive agenda.
I think a lot of people hear that, and the case that we just talked about that went before the Supreme Court essentially, and say, how can you see that and say that Biden is a greater threat to democracy?
Well, where are we losing our freedoms? How are our freedoms being constrained? They're being constrained by the progressive government. And, democracy, especially, from the Anglosphere democracies, the Five Eyes and so forth, the threat's never been for autocratic government on the right.
But how specifically is Biden threatening democracy?
The threat to freedom and democracy has always been on the left. It's the collectivist, socialist agenda. And that is where we're losing our freedom. Parents are losing the freedom to control their children's education. People can't speak their mind without losing their jobs and things like that. This is worse than the McCarthy era. Where is that coming from? It's not coming from the right.
Those two things that you just noted there, you believe are worse than a president of the United States trying to subvert the will of the people by overturning the results of the election?
I think a country, all the things together, like we're not enforcing our borders. We have open borders. We have lawlessness in our cities. We have regulations coming fast and furious, so telling people what kind of stoves they can use and what kinds of cars they have to drive, and eliminating cars and so forth. Yeah, those are the threats to democracy.
But President Biden is not in control of what some school boards across the country are doing.
He's using the
you can make that
administrative
argument,
what
but
are these
how
major,
is that the same thing?
Major changes are being made in our country without the democratic process, and they're being made by bureaucrats in these agencies.
Pause. You cannot argue that Republicans across the country are not doing that as well. In my own hometown, there's a huge fight at the library over which books kids can read. This is not something that is a single-party fight.
Do you think don't you think there should be some limits on what people are able to read at very young ages?
I just think people look at what you're saying and they don't.
Well, some people might.
Maybe even Republicans who have concerns about what's happening with school boards or the culture. And don't, maybe abortion even, don't equate that with January 6th and Trump's efforts. When you told him the election was not stolen, and he still went out there and said it was stolen and led a lot of people to believe that. Those things aren't equal. It feels like a false equivalency.
Well, I disagree. I think the country is much more susceptible to losing freedoms by the excesses of the left, and they have been steadily, and that's clear. People lose their jobs. Kids can't speak out in the classroom. They have to go along with what the professor says in order to get good grades and so forth. It's become like a Stepford nation being directed by the progressive elites.
Republicans are also trying to limit what could be said in the classroom. But I do want to ask you, because you're a lifelong Republican, I don't think it's a surprise that you don't like those issues that a lot of Republicans blame on Democrats. I think there's a question of how they're the same. But I'd want you to listen to what another lifelong Republican, Liz Cheney, said about your decision to vote for the Republican ticket in November.
Given what Bill Barr has said publicly about Trump's lack of fitness for office, I think that his assertion now that he's actually going to support Trump for office is indefensible, and was frankly disappointing to see.
She says it's indefensible.
Well, that's her view. That's her view. The fact of the matter is, as I said all along, I agreed with Trump's policies, and despite the media, the left-wing media's effort to portray it as a lawless administration, it wasn't. His policies were sound, and we had victories in courts, and we defended them. I think that Biden is unfit for office.
So you're basically saying that you are voting because you want the Republican policies.
Well, that's certainly part of it.
Well, I'm glad you said that.
But I also don't
Hold on. I'm glad you said that, because you told Geraldo Rivera last year, you may want his policies, but Trump will not deliver Trump policies. He will deliver chaos, and if anything, lead to a backlash that will set his policies much further back than they would otherwise be. You're even acknowledging he can't accomplish those Republican policies.
What I was saying was, if you want Trump's policies, if you're MAGA and want to make America great again, the other candidates will be successful at that much more than he will.
But
for
that's
the reasons
not the other
I stated.
candidates. It's going to be Donald Trump.
That's right. I'm certainly not going to get anywhere near what I'd like under Biden, and Biden is not a great moral exemplar. Okay. And is he following the laws? Here he is giving away another round of forgiving student loans after he lost it in the Supreme Court, and he thinks he can get away. And he thinks he can get away with it by getting it out the door before the election. But he's not enforcing the law on the borders.
But those are policy differences that you disagree with. Trump, I remember also when border numbers were at an all-time high in the spring of 2019. So the idea that border chaos only happens under this administration is inaccurate. But I think people see that.
No, wait a minute. We had it under control because we had a program approved by the Supreme Court called Remain in Mexico that was fully lawful and had shut down the border, and he came in and lifted it.
How can you equate? The border is a real issue. I've been to the border. No one's denying that. But is that the same thing as what you said recently, which was that, the conduct that was involved with Donald Trump? You said trying to subvert and prevent the progress, the execution of probably the most important process we have, which is the peaceful transfer of power after an election. Name one thing that Biden has done that's worse than that.
I think his whole administration is a disaster for the country.
Is worse than subverting the peaceful transfer of power?
Did he succeed?
Only because Vice President Mike Pence stood in the way, and now the people who are lining up to be VP again say that they will not do what Mike Pence did.
I mean, look, I was very loud and saying I thought it was the whole episode was shameful, and I'm very troubled by it, and that's why it's not an easy decision. But I think when you have a Hobson's choice, you have to pick the lesser of two evils.
You don't see this as the definition of putting party over country?
No.
Thank you for watching another episode of David Michael Wood's Unfiltered. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, share the video, give us a like. Thank you, God bless, and have a great day.